late? Is it? No, it's okay. It's like nighttime.
Yeah, it's 9:30.
Mexico. Oh, okay, 9:30. Okay, that's pretty good.
I'm sitting
Uh,
in India.
Cape Town, Ukraine. Ooh, Nigeria. Oh, super international crowd today. What a
Yeah,
party here. Okay. Well, I hope people are getting like their dinners or a coffee. You can just sit back and relax, and I will take you through some of the concepts for FVM and IPC, and then show you a very short end of a demo because there was a lot of prep work, and if I build it from scratch, it would take more than this session. So I'll show you the end of the demo and what you can like expect once you start building. Cool. So I will kick it off. Let me just share my screen. And I'll go slow. So if anyone has questions, you can pop it in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. All right.
cool. Before you start presenting, let me just officially welcome you. All right,
Oh,
if that,
okay. Yes, please.
yeah, yeah, cool. So I think we're live. So yeah, so hey everyone, and welcome to the Hack workshop titled "Building On-Chain with FVM and IPC." Joining us today is Sarah, who will be taking us through the session. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sarah. Workshop started.
Thanks, Calvin. Okay, yeah, so as I mentioned, as you guys are coming in, I'm gonna run through FVM and IPC. So this will go for the Filecoin bounty, which is probably the biggest bounty in this hackathon now. So we'll make it painless. I promise it's pretty easy to set up. You should be able to build your dapp. I think a lot of the work will be for you to innovate and hack a meaningful solution. And I'll talk through some use cases that you can think about and key concepts that you need to know. All right. I'm also on the mentorship channel. I usually reply within like give me a day. I also have invited a few more other folks from our team to come in and answer questions. I see a lot coming in on the Filecoin channel, so continue asking your questions there, and we can build with you for this whole month. All right. Okay, so let me share my screen and kick it off. So a quick intro from me. My name is Sarah. I am currently leading a new team called Filecoin Builder, so for short, Philby. We are part of the Filecoin ecosystem. I was previously around doing DX during the launch of the Filecoin Virtual Machine, all the way for about a year or so, and then moved on to double up to cover Interplanetary Consensus for DX. Leading the DX team there, which is the scalability framework that is currently targeting Filecoin, and I will share more because it is not just Filecoin. And so now I lead a team that is purely focused on builder enablement, from early builders to more mature teams. Our goal is really to help move builders over to building like a sustainable, meaningful solution in the Filecoin ecosystem. So if you're looking to get your start with a Web3 startup, or you want to own a tool, and contribute to the ecosystem, we are here to build with you. And we have many different initiatives. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. If you want to find out more and see all the updates, follow us on Twitter at FVMDev. Cool. So I don't know if everyone's like on the mobile, on their desktop, but it'll be really useful to give me a show of hands on how many of you have tried building with FVM or IPC before. Like if you can just give like a reaction, it'll give me a good sense as to how much you guys know already. Okay, I see a few. That's great. So you guys have actually built with FVM and IPC, right? Awesome. And how many of you here are like 101 IPC FVM? Okay, we have a few. Okay. Cool. So if you're watching the recording too, we will try to span the whole spectrum of 101s to going a little bit deeper into what you can think about building. So just to give like I think setting context is always really important. The Filecoin master plan is, yeah, I think very well amplified at this point. We wanted to build the world's largest decentralized platform. We onboarded a ton of data. And then with all the data on there and more people having storage needs, we wanted to allow programmability on the network. So programmable storage so that people can use it within their dapps and connect easily rather than it being a siloed like DePIN infrastructure or backend that you have to, go through a lot of manual steps to connect to, which isn't very usable. So this has opened up a lot of different conversations within Filecoin, which is like things such as rather than storing huge, vast amounts of data from one institution onto Filecoin, if we're opening up programmability, everyone's going to be building with it. So how can we also enable smaller pieces of data to be uploaded and stored to Filecoin, and not just using IPFS, because IPFS is pinning and it's also not, it's not reliable for the long term because your peer-to-peer nodes could always go down or close off, and so your data might disappear. So how can we then provide reliable guarantees with Filecoin but allow builders to use it? So it opened up a lot of questions. Moving on from step 3, so we did step 3 last year in March, and we're still continuing to develop FVM. My team's also in charge of continuing the roadmap for FVM. It's also EVM compatible, which is why we partner so closely with Eve Global. So all the tools that you're familiar with are available for you to use with FVM. And then step 4, which is not shown here because this was the original vision from Juan, and that vision has grown since. Step 4 is then we started thinking about scalable networks. So Filecoin, as you know it, is mostly an L1. We don't have any L2s, the same way that Ethereum has like Polygon and Arbitrum and so on. And so we thought about how can we provide a scaling solution for people to create so rather than provide a network on its own that we wanted to host, we thought, especially because FVM is EVM compatible, you can use it, you can do cross-chain with Polygon and so on. We thought, what new can we offer? And so we created IPC, which is a scalability framework that's hyper-customizable. I'll talk a little bit about the use cases later, but the difference here is that it is highly optimized for Filecoin and is actually designed to support DePIN infrastructures more than anything else. And it's also designed to be multi-chain. So in general, you will see a lot from Filecoin coming in this year that will focus on exporting storage and retrieval services to the wider Web3 ecosystem rather than staying within the Filecoin ecosystem on its own, because it's a very powerful DePIN infra, but we want to export that to other ecosystems. So yeah, so that's a little bit of context setting. I thought that would be really useful to give to all of you. So moving on, as I mentioned, so to give you a sense of if you're new to Filecoin, when I came in new, there were a lot of different terms to figure out. And also I did not have a very clear structure of how the stack works within Filecoin. And so I think this is a really useful visual representation to give to anyone that wants to wrap their head around how they want to architect their solution. So the differences here is that we have the P2P network and IPFS is below on the dotted line across. So it is not on the blockchain, clarifying that. Usage of IPFS, of course, it's widely used, it's very popular, but it's also not exactly storage on Filecoin. And particularly for this hackathon, we're looking for usage beyond IPFS. IPFS is really good to use in complement to storing data on Filecoin, especially if you want to cache some data, put it as a data buffer, put it as somewhere where your storage provider can collect the data from. That's what IPFS is really useful for, but you're using it together with Filecoin. So if you're using IPFS alone for this hackathon, there's way more that you can do, and we're really looking to see that as the judging panel. So bear that in mind when you build your solution. So IPFS and P2P network are separate. They are not on the blockchain. Coming into the blockchain itself, just to be clear, Filecoin is the layer 0, FVM is the layer 1 on Filecoin, and it actually allows you to compute over state, but it's not a network on its own. It's very much intertwined with Filecoin. See it almost as a feature of Filecoin. And then we have the layer 2, which is enabled by IPC. And I'll talk a bit more about IPC in a bit. There's layer 2+. The goal is that you can really create a hierarchy of different subnets. We call them subnets, which are different networks. And so you can create layer 2, 3, 4, 5. Of course, security decreases as you go down the line. Also, for the purpose of this hackathon, we highly recommend you stick to an L2 for now. L3s are still a little unstable because this is still a really new development for Filecoin. And so you guys are working on early access products here. So yeah, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in general, this is how the stack works. So just a little bit on how FVM works, because I also got confused around what exactly is it doing. And so I think once you understand this crucial like concept, it should make it much easier for you to design your solution. So what FVM does is actually it manipulates the metadata around storage deals on Filecoin. So when we say, and I know I have this, like, I'll walk you through this visual diagram, but when we say that FVM allows you to do programmable storage, you're not actually manipulating the pieces of data itself, opening up the data file and like manipulating the data within. So if you wanted to do like changes to your data or queries, like you would technically be calling the metadata of the storage deal. So if let's say you have your PCID or COMP, which is the proof of your data, that's what it will be calling, and then all that computation will technically happen off-chain or in a separate computation network like Lilypad or Co-op Hive. So the FVM works around the metadata of the file. So if you look at this diagram on your right, to give you a sense, the SP network is here. Storage providers are the ones storing data. The Filecoin blockchain is the one that represents all the storage deals that are made. And then the Filecoin Virtual Machine allows you to manipulate the metadata of your storage deal that is represented on Filecoin. All this does not touch your actual data. Your actual data is going to be sitting separately. Maybe your storage provider will collect your data from an IPFS buffer. That is where you store your data off-chain, the bigger data file, but it's represented on-chain and then manipulated by the FVM. Yeah, and so that allows you to then run different dapps such as compute, encryption, DeFi, data DAOs, and so on. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the applications of FVM. There are two main applications. I think two features that have come up around programmable storage, and that is still a space that is rapidly developing. So if you want to build something new in this hackathon on what you can do with programmable storage and retrievals, that you can definitely check out. You can either come up with a solution yourself, or you can check out the 100 ideas. Well, it's not 100 right now. It's like 10 ideas for the hackathon. So ETH Global and I have and our team has worked on a list of ideas that you can check out. But look into that on what programmable storage can do and what you can possibly build. But two things that will really help you along, which are developments that you can then use as part of your solution. One is aggregation and pod size. So pod size stands for proof of data sector inclusion or deal sector inclusion, one of those. What these two things do is to allow you to store smaller pieces of data. So earlier I did mention, what's the motivation behind it. Before the FVM came around, everyone was making manual deals with storage providers. So what would happen is that you would have to do a handshake agreement with a storage provider so that they can do some KYC, and then you would say, hey, I want to store this piece of data. Can you store it? They'll be like, yeah, blah, 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 back and forth. How long you want to store it, how much you want to pay, and then your data gets stored. And it's a very heavy, long process. And so for the storage providers themselves, they, because it's a very expensive computation to be able to store a deal and represent it on Filecoin, they are looking for large pieces of data to make economic sense. And so large pieces of data kind of fit within the sector standards, which are like 32 gig or 64 gig, right? Which is huge. So what if I want to store a 1 gig or less than 1 gig, maybe a few KB kind of data, right? Like really light, maybe a few MB. So what happens in this case is that aggregation came into play. So with the FVM, it allowed for logic to be able to aggregate several different small files. So imagine if 100 different people were storing 32 different people were storing 1 gig. All those different 1 gigs can then aggregate into a single storage piece that then storage providers will be incentivized to pick up and put within a storage deal and give you, so when they return the proof of your data stored, they will then return a proof of data sector inclusion, which is the proof that your small piece of data is stored within a larger sector on Filecoin. So it'll tell you exactly where it's stored. And so if you want to retrieve that single piece of data, you don't have to retrieve it from a huge deal and pull out that piece of data. You will be able to call for that small piece of data and get it. So that is how aggregation and pod size works, and you can kind of see it in the diagram over on your right. What I just described, like many people storing, aggregating, returning the pod size proof, and then the storage deal getting made on Filecoin. So you'll be like, wow, how do I even get into this and how do I use this in my dapp? Do check out lighthouse.storage. They have a really easy SDK available for you to store small pieces of data where they do your aggregation off-chain in their separate server. And if you want it in a more decentralized way, they actually have a smart contract running on our calibration testnet that you can call to then store your small piece of data and return your POTSI proof. So it's just whichever method you choose, they have both available. Depending on the needs of your application, you can decide on which is easier for you to use, but this allows you to store small pieces of data. So do check that out. Very important tool. Lighthouse.storage is really, really important for people to build, especially if you're not looking to build a whole storage workflow on your own and you want to build on top of that and include storage as part of it. So the other piece I want to talk about is renewable storage. So permanent data storage is something that decentralized networks are very interested in. We want to store our data and have it sit there for a really long time without having to pay the crazy rates that we pay on other Web2 systems that exist today. So how do we allow that, right? And not just with extending the duration of your data stored, but also ensuring the health of your data stored. So with a decentralized network, it does rely on several nodes being reliable, right, within the network. And so what happens if you store data with a single storage provider, what happens if that storage provider, for example, just has a catastrophe and goes down? So your data might disappear. What you will want to do in that case is to replicate a few copies of your data to make sure that it's backed up. You also want to make sure that you are monitoring the health of that SP. And if there's any issue with the sector, not just the SP's operation on its own, but any issue with the sector that your data is held within, you want to measure the health of that, monitor the health of that, and make sure that your data is alive, right? So there are 3 different R's here that we've provided we launched last year to allow you to do that with your data, which is replicate, renew, and repair. So very similar to what I just mentioned. And all this is actually available within the smart contract, the aggregation smart contract. So again, if you head over to lighthouse.storage, they have an aggregator smart contract there that also has functions that you can call that will allow you to easily renew, repair, and replicate your data. And these can also be set based on conditions. So if you're building a solution, you can start thinking about, what kind of solutions will involve me needing to guarantee the health of my data and set certain conditions, like maybe funding through a DAO. If the funding hits a certain amount, then you can replicate the data, or if it hits a certain date based on an event, you want to make sure that that data is then renewed or
you got shit from an event.
Sorry, what?
Oh shit.
Okay, that's okay. That always happens. So yeah, so that is renewable storage. Do check that out too. So these are 2 really useful things that you can use with FVM. Now coming to IPC, we're going to talk a little bit about scalability. So explaining what IPC actually does, IPC is a framework to build massive hyper-customizable subnets. When we say hyper-customizable, yes, we based it off of Tendermint, but we are using a separate, well, it's not exactly Tendermint itself, it's very similar to it, but we've added a lot more functions in it that allow you to customize, for example, low-level syscalls. You can also customize the kind of workloads that you want to have within your subnet. Anyway, before I get into that, I also want to make it clear that when IPC itself is not a network that exists today, that is operated by someone else, that you can build dApps on top of, like Polygon, for example. It is actually a framework that you can then deploy, similar to Cosmos. You are deploying your own chain, right? So this will allow, if you are using this within your application, you will need to run and operate your own subnet, and I'll show you an example of that on my VS Code later. You need to run your own subnet, and then you need to develop dApps on top of that subnet. The cool thing that I just mentioned, because your subnet is hyper-customizable, you can customize it for whatever needs that you have for your application. So if you have certain functions that are not readily available in a chain, let's say an ML GPU workload that you really want to run that is highly customized, you can do so within IPC. So that's what IPC is really good for. And the other thing is that you can, so I did say that for this hackathon, at this point, L2s are the best to stay within because it's the most stable. You can do horizontal scaling with IPC. So we have general message passing. It should be there in the docs. If not, it's in the repo. General message passing allows you to do easy communication between two different subnets as long as it's anchored to the same network. So if you're anyway, you'll be anchoring it to Filecoin for the purpose of this hackathon. So if let's say you create 3 different subnets, each with a hyper-specific purpose, they can communicate across each other and then checkpoint their state back to Filecoin, Filecoin's calibration testnet. So you can always think about how you want to break up your application. Maybe you want to have like a regional sharding of data in a database in one subnet. Maybe you want to have your compute functions running in another subnet, and maybe you just want to run transactions or DeFi protocols really quickly in another subnet. And how can these all work together for you to shard your dapp ecosystem and achieve the best performance, and then checkpoint everything back to Filecoin calibration testnet. So you can build it in that way and think about it in that sense, right? So a lot more docs on this. I won't get too deep, but to give you a really high level idea of what you can build. Okay, and on IPC's usage, so IPC is still in development right now. We see it as being optimized for the DPIN network that Filecoin is a big part of. We have some partners that are working with us already today. So we see IPC as allowing aggregators, hot storage layers, aggregators being what I talked about earlier on. Imagine a full functioning aggregator network, which Lighthouse is launching V2 of really, really soon, sometime this year. We have Tableland that is building hot storage layers, and hot storage means today on Filecoin, your data is technically cold stored because it's stored within a deal. But if you have hot storage, that is essentially you storing data and retrieving it really quickly, the same way you would do with IPFS, but on a blockchain instead. So Tableland is looking into that. They should also be releasing something this year, which is really exciting. You can think about compute networks. So Fluence just launched on their own customized IPC subnet at Denver this year. And so they allow decentralized computing. You can definitely check them out. And I know they're one of the bounties. So if you want to use the Fluence network and build with FVM, that will also qualify for the Filecoin bounty and the Fluence bounty at the same time. So check that out. And then also enabling CDNs for faster retrieval of content and a lot more things below too. So this all in all is the kind of vision we have for the Filecoin ecosystem in terms of storage and retrieval. Now we know that this is like very storage and retrieval focused. What we're looking for is like really cool ways to innovate solutions in that space. But if you want to leverage existing on storage solutions such as Lighthouse, for example, to build something that is vertical specific, for example, like for healthcare or for gaming or something, please feel free to do that. We would love to see those too. Okay, so yeah, I've talked a lot about what you can possibly build with FVM and IPC, and I hope I gave you some really good ideas. I'm going to show you really quickly, I know I'm almost out of time, but I'm going to show you really quickly how you can set up a subnet and how you can get it running within your MetaMask. So let me just show you this. I've already done the work beforehand because it does take about 15 minutes or so to set up an IPC subnet, depending on your computer build. So I will show you the end result. All right, so pretty straightforward. If you go into the IPC documentation, the links should be within your dashboard, and you follow deploy a subnet, you will eventually get to this point where it says your subnet is ready. You'll get a subnet ID and chain ID and everything that you need to have a running network. And so then you can hit really quickly into MetaMask, and let me show you my MetaMask. These are all test accounts, so there's really no private key that you can steal. All right, where is it? Strange, where did my... 1 second. Oh, here it is. Okay. So if you hit into my MetaMask, you can actually see that I've added the account, the network from earlier, and I've added the wallet that I created as part of that network. So if you see on, if you look at the IPC network, do I see my IPC network? Okay, here. Yeah, I actually input this manually myself, and you can get it once you've connected to your MetaMask. It should be pretty easy for you to run different deploy different smart contracts if you're using Remix, for example. But this is to show you that you can, subnets are real once you create them. I think you have to keep your Docker running. Yeah, you most probably, or you can pause it and then you can set it up running again. Yeah, so you can keep building for a month, but this should allow you to then go forth and build on the IPC network. So pretty easy to set up, no issues there. There are, and I think I'll share one last resource, which is the really important cookbook that you can use, and this will give you a lot of different recipes that you can build with. Yeah, over here. So if you scan this QR code, it will take you to the Filecoin docs. It will show you different ways and different tools that are in the ecosystem that you can use to achieve outcomes like storing data, retrieving, computing, and so on, encryption, and more. So head over here and check those out. Those will get you started really quickly. IPC is not within these cookbooks yet because these were launched a few months ago. You can check out the IPC docs, and we will be on the channels to mentor you and take questions. So yeah, thank you so much. I think that's about it. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat. Oh, wow. Okay.
Cool. I think that was great. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us today and for the great presentation. If there are any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or shoot your questions on the chat box and we can take it out from there.
I am just gonna see. Yeah, sorry, Benjamin. I'll do a live demo, but it would take like extra time. It's not enough time. But there are previous videos. If you just search like setting up a subnet with IPC on a search engine search, it will come out. There have been a few videos that I've done, my team has done, and it will walk you through exactly how to set up a subnet. Okay, I am working from Mujahid. Direct deal, okay, using FVM starter kit, packing of data, FVM data depot. Yeah, I know what you mean. This is the data preparation. So you brought up a good point. So one thing to note with Filecoin at this point is that for any type of data deal that you want to make, you're going to have to prepare the data yourself. Preparing your data is basically transforming the raw file that you have into a car file, a .car file, which is, and then generating a COM-P that you can use to refer to that piece of data. So these are some prereqs that you really need to be able to represent your data on the blockchain. There is the FVM data depot, which is a really easy GUI for you to do so. I don't know, I remember seeing like a line of code that we had that will allow you to do this within your app, probably front end as well. Could you paste this question in the Discord and I will find you that line of code? But there should be a line of code that allows you to do this pretty easily. Yeah. But there are no APIs for the FVM data depot. Okay, Aryan, will clients have to wait for the data to be added to the sector? So if you're doing from a client directly to a storage provider, yes, you will have to wait. Because the storage provider will wait for many other pieces of data to come in and then package that into a deal and then process the deal. But if you're using Lighthouse.storage, which is a middleman aggregator, they are taking on that commitment to get your data stored. So once you send them the piece of data, they will guarantee that they will send you back the port side proof that they generate beforehand. So technically they're like predicting it. They'll give you the port side proof for it and they'll guarantee the storage of your data. It will also be available as a pinned copy on IPFS for you to retrieve anytime you want. And once the data is actually stored, they will notify you once they make the deal with the storage provider. So they are taking on that responsibility instead. So you technically don't have to wait. Within your dapp, it should, your workflows can run without waiting, which is good. But do note that the trade-off there is that if you're going to Lighthouse, it's not technically fully decentralized because you are going through their centralized aggregator. So it's a small trade-off, but it's really up to you. Hope that gives you some answers. Okay, and let me see. Saturn's updated docs. Wait, let me just stop sharing my screen. Do they not have updated docs on the Saturn website? Here. Okay, yeah, I am almost done, but yes, really quickly, here is, okay, just one last minute. Okay, and then in case of that, how to agree, okay, all right. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I've answered most of the questions. Yeah, if there's anything else, we will be in the partner Filecoin channel on Discord.
Sweet.
Thanks everyone
Thank
for
you.
joining. That was great. Thanks for being around. Very international crowd. Hope you all have a good weekend ahead.
Sweet. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you everyone for joining the workshop. Feel free to connect with Sarah in the partner channel on Discord, as she mentioned, and they shall get back to you.